Before we begin, I want you to forget everything you've been told about power. Forget the motivational quotes. Forget the leadership seminars. Forget the idea that the meek will inherit the earth. They won't. They never have. What you're about to hear is not a self-help script. It is a confession. A confession of how the world actually works, pulled from the lives of the most powerful figures who ever walked this earth. Caesars, popes, generals, presidents, men and women who looked history in the eye and bent it to their will. Some of them you worship. Some of them you were taught to fear. All of them used these 7 principles. And by the end of this video, so will you. Tactic 1. Control the frame, not the argument. The year is 49 BC. Julius Caesar stands at the edge of the Rubicon River with his army. Roman law is clear. No general may cross this river with his troops. To do so is an act of war against the Senate, against Rome itself. But Caesar doesn't announce a coup. He doesn't talk about power or conquest or domination. Instead, he tells his soldiers, and anyone who will listen, that he is defending the rights of the Roman people. That the Senate has been corrupted. That he, Caesar, is the only thing standing between Rome and tyranny. He reframes an act of treason as an act of liberation. And the people believed him. That is the first tactic. Control the frame. Not the argument, the frame. Because here is the truth most people never grasp. By the time an argument starts, it is already over. The winner was decided the moment someone chose what the argument was about. Caesar didn't argue about whether crossing the Rubicon was legal. He changed the question entirely. The question became, who is the real enemy of Rome? Fast forward 2,000 years. It is 1933. Adolf Hitler, and I include him not to glorify, but because history demands we study even its darkest chapters, does not rise to power by promising war and death. He frames Germany's humiliation after World War I as a wound inflicted by enemies within. He doesn't ask people to follow a dictator. He asks them to reclaim what was taken from them. The frame wasn't give me power. The frame was take back what's yours. People will resist a command. They will die for a cause. This is why every despot, every revolutionary, every visionary who ever moved a population at scale did it the same way. They didn't change minds. They changed the lens. In your own life, before you walk into any negotiation, any confrontation, any conversation where something is at stake, ask yourself, who is setting the frame right now? If the answer isn't you, you are already losing. Tactic 2. Let silence do the dirty work. In the spring of 1945, as the Second World War drew to a close, the Allied leaders gathered at Yalta to divide the post-war world. Franklin Roosevelt was dying. Churchill was exhausted. But Joseph Stalin arrived rested, patient, and almost entirely silent. While Roosevelt and Churchill negotiated, proposed, and counter-proposed, filling the room with words, Stalin Saturday. He listened. He waited. And when he finally spoke, it was with the precision of a surgeon. He had heard everything, given away nothing. And he walked out of Yalta with Eastern Europe. Silence is not weakness. Silence is the most underestimated weapon in human history. Think about what happens when you go quiet in a conversation. The other person panics. They talk more. They explain themselves. They justify. They reveal. Every word they speak in that silence is intelligence you didn't have 30 seconds ago. Sun Tzu wrote it in The Art of War over 2,000 years ago. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Silence subdues without fighting. There is a story told about Henry Kissinger, arguably the most powerful diplomat of the 20th century. When foreign leaders would come to him with demands, with grievances, with ultimatums, Kissinger would listen to everything they said. And then say nothing. Just nothing. For 10 seconds. 20. Sometimes more. Most people cannot survive 20 seconds of silence with another human being. The discomfort is physical. It feels like falling. And so they speak. And in speaking, they give themselves away. Kissinger's silence was a trap. A beautiful, invisible trap. The next time someone challenges you, a colleague, a rival, a partner in a negotiation, try it. Let them finish. Then wait. Don't fill the space. Watch what they hand you. Tactic 3. Make them feel like they chose it. Catherine the Great did not seize the Russian throne. She was invited to take it. By 1762, Catherine had spent years carefully building alliances among the Imperial Guard, the Russian Orthodox Church, and the Russian nobility. She had positioned herself as a devoted Russian, learning the language, converting to orthodoxy, embedding herself in the culture of her adopted country so deeply that people forgot she was German. When her husband, Tsar Peter III, proved himself unstable and incompetent, it wasn't Catherine who moved against him. It was everyone around him. The guard rose up. The nobles turned. The church stayed silent. And when Catherine stepped forward to restore order, it was not as a usurper. It was as the answer to a prayer that everyone around her had been guided, gently, invisibly, to pray. That is the third tactic. Make them feel like they chose it. Because here is something deep in human psychology that has never changed. We are ferociously defensive of our own choices. Tell a man what to do, and he will resist you on principle, even if the thing you're asking is completely reasonable. But let a man arrive at the same conclusion himself, and he will defend it with his life. The great manipulators throughout history understood this instinctively. Napoleon didn't just conquer Europe, he made the people of each conquered nation feel, at least initially, that French rule was their liberation from corrupt monarchies. He offered them something to choose. He gave them the Napoleonic Code, a legal framework that was genuinely more progressive than what most Europeans had known. He wasn't just a conqueror handing down orders. He was a reformer offering a vision. And they chose him. Until they didn't. But that is a different lesson. In your own world, whether you are leading a team, closing a deal, or navigating a relationship, the most powerful question you can ask is not, how do I convince them? It is, how do I arrange the conditions so they convince themselves? Give people two roads. Make sure both roads lead to your destination. Let them pick. Then get out of the way. Tactic 4. Reveal nothing, observe everything. Queen Elizabeth I ruled England for 4 to 5 years. In an era where women were considered unfit for power. In an era where every neighboring monarch wanted her dead, her throne taken, or her hand in marriage as a political prize. She survived them all. And her primary weapon wasn't her army. It was her inscrutability. Elizabeth was famous for never showing her hand. She would receive ambassadors, listen to proposals, smile warmly, and commit to absolutely nothing. She kept even her closest advisors guessing. Robert Cecil, Francis Walsingham, the Earl of Leicester. None of them knew, on any given day, exactly where they stood with the Queen. This was not accident. This was architecture. Because Elizabeth understood something fundamental. The moment someone knows what you want, they have leverage over you. Your desires are your vulnerabilities. In the court of Versailles under Louis XIV, the Sun King built an entire culture of observation. His courtiers were required to live at Versailles, under constant surveillance. Louis himself was famous for watching, always watching, who spoke to whom, who laughed at whose joke, who left the room when certain topics arose. Information was his currency, and he hoarded it like gold. The lesson of these rulers is not that you should become paranoid or isolated. The lesson is this: in any competitive environment, the person with the most information and the least exposed vulnerability controls the terrain. Ask questions. Listen more than you speak. Keep your plans private until execution is inevitable. Sun Tzu wrote it plainly, let your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. You cannot fall like a thunderbolt if everyone saw the storm forming. Tactic 5. Manufacture scarcity and urgency. In October of 1962, the world held its breath. American spy planes had photographed Soviet missile installations being constructed in Cuba. President John F. Kennedy was informed. And for 13 days, the most powerful men on Earth played a game of psychological pressure that nearly ended civilization. But here is what most history classes leave out. Kennedy's masterstroke was not military. It was temporal. He imposed a naval blockade, a deadline made physical. Soviet ships were steaming toward Cuba. The world watched a clock ticking toward collision. Kennedy manufactured a moment of decision. He forced Khrushchev into a closing window. Because Kennedy understood, as every great negotiator throughout history has understood, that urgency changes behavior. When there is no deadline, decisions get delayed. Positions stay flexible. Opponents can maneuver, regroup, and wait you out. But when the window is closing, when the ships are in the water and the world is watching, people make decisions they might otherwise postpone for years. The scarcity of time became Kennedy's leverage. Go back further. To the ancient merchant republic of Venice. The Venetians were perhaps the greatest commercial power in the medieval world, and they built that power on a principle that every modern salesperson, every startup founder, every power player instinctively knows. Abundance kills desire. The Venetians controlled the spice trade, not just by having spices, but by carefully managing how many spices reached any given market at any given time. They made the rare feel rarer. They made the available feel scarce. And they became rich beyond imagination. In your world, this principle operates everywhere. The job offer with an expiration date. The deal that's only available this week. The opportunity with limited seats. These are not tricks. They are physics. Human beings are wired to want what they might lose more than they want what they can always have. Control the timeline. You control the decision. Tactic 6. Use allies as instruments. In 15th century Florence, the Medici family did not rule. Not officially. They were bankers, patrons of the arts, generous philanthropists who funded churches and commissioned masterpieces and threw lavish celebrations for the citizens of Florence. They held no crown, no official title of power. And yet for generations, they controlled everything. Because the Medici understood something about power that most people miss entirely. Direct power is fragile. It draws enemies. It creates resentment. It makes you a target. But influence, quiet, distributed, networked influence, is almost impossible to attack. Cosimo de' Medici didn't give orders. He granted loans. And when you owe a man money, you listen to him carefully. He didn't install politicians. He funded them. And when you are funded by someone, you remember who put you in the room. He didn't demand loyalty. He cultivated it, over decades, through generosity, through favors, through the slow accumulation of people who quietly understood that their fortunes were tied to his. By the time anyone thought to challenge Medici power, they looked around and realized there was almost no one left who wasn't, in some way, connected to the family. This is the sixth tactic. You don't always need to be the one who acts. You need someone who acts on your behalf. In the court of Louis XIV, Cardinal Richelieu, the man who arguably built modern France, operated entirely through proxies and intermediaries. He was feared not because of what he did directly, but because of the vast network of agents, informants, and obligated allies who moved on his behalf throughout Europe. His reach was invisible. His power was total. The question to ask yourself is not, who can I control? The question is, who can I make indispensable to? Because the person you make indispensable to you will fight your battles without being asked. They will speak for you when you're not in the room. They will protect your interests as if they were their own. Because, in ways they may not even fully understand, they are. So there they are. 7 principles drawn from the courts of Florence, the battlefields of Gaul, the corridors of the Kremlin, the war rooms of the 20th century. 7 tactics used by the people who shaped the world you live in. Now, I am not going to tell you what to do with them. I am not going to give you a reassuring moral at the end of this. Because I think you are smart enough to decide that yourself. What I will tell you is this. These principles exist whether you choose to learn them or not. Whether you use them or not. The only question that has ever mattered, is whether you are the one holding them, or the one they are being used on. Think about that, and decide.